I fucking love that video. I really fucking do. It makes me quite happy every time I see it, because for all the hardcore that Putin tries to put on, he's just such a big ol' softy when it comes to dogs. He loves his dogs. It's so adorable to me. It makes me so happy to see, because even in the heart of one of the most powerful authoritarian nations' presidents, we have the heart of gold of someone who sees a dog and can't help but say, "Oh, I love you," and kiss you on the cheek and rub you and, "Hey, yes, I love you." He still has that dog, by the way. That was given to him in 2010. I cannot remember the name of the dog off the top of my head, though. I'm so sorry. I know the name of his other dog that the Japanese Prime Minister gave him, Yume. But that dog, off the top of my head, I can't remember it, unfortunately. Anyway, welcome, 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 bon locale, to another episode of 7 at 7 with me, your host, Sevi Rose, and, of course, a shit ton of news that we need to cover. This week has been fucking fascinating. For one very important reason, it's been rather exemplary of the way that media outlets — I hate talking with headphones on because I can only hear half of my notes — the way news outlets have done everything in their power to hide the fact that so many of them are in trouble. Well, I say news outlets, media outlets, right? This week has been a nightmare for Twitter, for Google, for Facebook, for all of those giants that I spend so much effort trying to shoot down. And it's absolutely amazing, but you wouldn't know that had you read Google News or the front page of the New York Times or something like that. It would be, you know, you'd be lucky if you could find those stories. Because they don't want to talk about that. All they want to talk about, and something unfortunately we're going to be talking about as well, is Trump calling Haiti and El Salvador shithole countries. And there goes my opportunity for monetization. Oh well. So much for that idea. I had totally had the interest in starting to monetize regularly again, but it occurs to me that's just not something I'm going to be able to do. I curse like a fucking sailor. I really do. And if, you know, for the people who go out and do captions, please replace any time I say fucking with something else, because that would just make my life that much easier. Like lovin' or I don't know. Because let's face it, most of what Google looks at is frame by frame to find copyrighted images and audio tracks of 20 seconds or more, as well as the auto-generated subtitles, which can be, of course, edited by users. So if any of you are up for that, go ahead, have a fucking blast, watch the show, and help me actually be monetizable, which I doubt I will. Very unlikely. Before we get into shithole countries, though, and let's face it, all countries are pretty shithole countries right now, there is one story that has been very interesting to me that I go away butt thingy, and that is the story of Chris Matthews asking for a Bill Cosby pill before his Clinton interview. No, go away. There's a video trying to pop up, and I do not want to let it talk. Yeah, see, it tried to pull that shit on me. But yeah, let's just dive right into it. Chris Matthews asks for his Bill Cosby pill before Hillary Clinton interview. Newly surfaced footage from January 2016 shows MSNBC host Chris Matthews, known for Hardball and a few other shows, joking about his Bill Cosby pill ahead of an interview with then-presidential candidate Hillary Clinton. In the clip, which was obtained by The Cut and published on Friday, the Hardball with Chris Matthews host is seen on camera before interviewing Clinton in an Iowa fire station during Democratic primary season. "Can I have some of the Queen's waters? Precious waters?" Matthews is shown asking a staffer. "Where's that Bill Cosby pill I brought with me?" Pretty fucking good joke if you ask me. At that point, the disgraced comedian had been accused of sexual abuse by dozens of women. No, he wasn't. If he was accused of sexual abuse by dozens of women at the beginning of 2016, we would have heard about it at the beginning of 2016. No, this is just one of the many ways the media goes for articles that piss off a portion of their audience and completely ignore the realities of the news. And of course, this story, as well as the Shithole Countries story, are just completely exemplary of this problem that mainstream news has. The Cut reached out to Matthews for comment, where the 72-year-old news veteran proclaimed that he deeply regretted the comment. "This was a terrible comment I made in poor taste during the height of the Bill Cosby headlines," he told the outlet. "I realize that's no excuse. I deeply regret it, and I'm sorry." As The Cut notes, Matthews has a long history of talking disparagingly about Clinton, once calling her witchy. Back in December, the Daily Caller reported that MSNBC had paid a woman who accused Matthews of sexual harassment back in 1999. Her complaint had been taken to the CNBC executives at the time, and an MSNBC spokesperson confirmed the report, calling the payment separation-related compensation. Now, this entire story is useless. One, you can't be charged for making a joke about Bill Cosby. Two, he wasn't trying to say he wanted to rape Hillary Clinton. As you can tell, he doesn't like Hillary Clinton. In fact, if you remember election season, he was the one person on MSNBC who was actually against Hillary Clinton. No, he wanted to take a pill and drug himself so he could cope with her. And everyone is forcing him to apologize and say he deeply regrets it. It's a pretty fucking funny joke if you ask me. Not the best wording, but where is the Bill Cosby pill that I brought with me? That's pretty fucking funny. I approve of it. I appreciate it. I just wish others were able to too. Unfortunately, sense of humor was the first death against the wall when the communists came this time, and as you can see, they are going to tackle anyone, even people on their side, if it suits their fucking narrative. But I just wanted to get that little funny story out of the way before we tuck into a much more depressing story. Because as everyone knows at this point, Donald Trump, in a private Oval Office meeting, made the comment that El Salvador and Haiti are shithole countries, and he pondered aloud why we're trying to get people from shithole countries as compared to better countries better for our economy, like, say, I don't know, Norway. And as far as the UN is concerned, Norway is one of the best, most successful, wealthiest countries in the world right now. And it's a fair fucking question, considering we are bottom-loading our country with immigrants who can't do more than flip burgers or work manual labor, and there just aren't enough of those jobs. In order to make our taxes work, in order to make our country work, we need immigrants of all economic statures. From the ditch diggers all the way up to the fucking investors and entrepreneurs. Now, most people aren't aware, but Haiti and El Salvador in 2010 and 2012 were given a special immunity to deportation due to the earthquake in 2010 in Haiti and the storm that hit El Salvador in 2012. However, 5 to 7 years, I believe, is far more than just enough time for them to start saying, okay, you know what? We've been mollycoddling 60,000 of you, close to 200,000 of you, who fled your country, which was a shithole and still is in many cases. But we can't keep you if you're going to take advantage of our welfare system, if you're going to take advantage of our states and federal services. You're tearing down our country by coming here and doing this without providing back for it. Not to say that there aren't people who don't work, right? A lot of these immigrants get jobs, don't get me wrong. They work hard, menial labor jobs and menial service jobs. Their English isn't often the best, however, they make good multilingual speakers for companies in California, in Texas, in Florida, and they do serve different purposes as well as cultural gateways for immigrants and tourists. But 200,000 of them is quite an impressive number, especially when you consider that 30% of them are on welfare. On welfare in a country that isn't their home country, but rather the country they came to because they wanted to get away from their shithole. Let us dive right into the story that started this fucking nightmare, and of course it comes from, where else, the Washington Post. Now, of course, if you want to read this story later, because I'm not going to read all of it, the link and a archive link is in the description box below. You can find that, as well as my Patreon and Maker support, my Streamlabs link. Any of those things can be found rather quickly, as well as all the links to all the articles and sources that I'm using today down below. And if I could just please ask, please consider liking, subscribing, sharing this video out, seeing how big we can get this audience, because I know you guys can do it, and I really love you guys, but YouTube fucking hates me. YouTube wouldn't promote me if my hair were on fire. In fact, I'm pretty sure they'd demonetize a video if someone's hair were on fire, so might not be the best metaphor. But yeah, you do those things, help the channel out, it would really do wonders for me, and it's not something I like saying. I don't like having to play this game. Unfortunately, YouTube's algorithms actually look for the words like and subscribe close to each other. So I have to say it if I want this show to be given to you on your recommendations. Now that I've gotten that out of the way, let us dive right into the Washington Post. Trump derides protections for immigrants from shithole countries. This, of course, was the article that started the mess, and this came out on yesterday, and it was the topic everyone was talking about. It took up the entire news cycle in a way I've not seen the take out the trash news cycle taken over since before the president was elected. It's been a really fucking good year of at least news cycles continuing pushing forward. Okay, last year I should say. But this year we've got the same problems it looks like we had in 2016, where media outlets are fearlessly ignoring important news for the sake of pushing their narrative and working towards not telling the story as the news company should, but rather producing a narrative that keeps people interested because it fits their political biases, their social biases, makes them feel like they're already hearing something they know. And that's not news. That's masturbation. It's prostitution in word form. But as the article states, President Trump grew frustrated with lawmakers Thursday in the Oval Office when they discussed protecting immigrants from Haiti, El Salvador, and African countries as part of a bipartisan immigration deal, according to several people briefed on the meeting. These words here, Haiti, El Salvador, and African countries, have been repeated as much as the words shithole countries. It's amazing how mimetic the original article has become for the left, because the left, as everyone knows, sucks at fucking memes. But the news outlets don't. They're really good at producing wording that is mimetic for the left, and it is what gets repeated time and time and time again in every article. The words Haiti, El Salvador, and African countries, despite being completely out of alphabetical order, is exactly how it shows up every fucking time. See, in my brain, I want to say African countries, El Salvador, and Haiti, because I'm a little bit fucking compulsive. But of course, if you go to every other fucking article, this is what they're saying. And when we watch Tucker Carlson's video in just a bit, you'll actually get to see him and his guest use those 6 words there, just like everyone else. They burn these words into your head. Why are we having these people from shithole countries come here? Trump said. According to these people. Oh, they're not even saying according to anonymous sources close to the president. They're just saying according to these people. Christ. I mean, this is completely fucking beyond the pale of journalistic misantics by just saying according to these people. Several people briefed on the meeting, so they weren't actually there. We're getting this shit third and fourth fucking hands. Trump then suggested that the United States should instead bring more people from countries such as Norway, whose prime minister he met with Wednesday. The president, according to a White House official, also suggested he would be open to more immigrants from Asian countries because he felt that they help the United States economically, which they actually do. They're quite hard workers, but they don't work shitty jobs. They tend to aim higher, looking for educated jobs or looking to get into college before moving on to an educated job. In addition, the president singled out Haiti, telling lawmakers that immigrants from that country must be left out of any deal, these people said. Again, we're not dealing with people who were in the Oval Office in this private conversation had by a president who is known to curse, known to swear. No, this is people who were briefed on the matter afterwards that then went to the fucking Washington Post. Why do we need more Haitians? Trump said, according to people familiar with the meeting. Again, where's the fucking journalistic integrity, Washington Post? What's your name? Josh Dawsey? Where's the fucking journalistic integrity, Josh Dawsey? Take them out, he said. Skipping down a little bit, a White House spokesman defended Trump's position on immigration without directly addressing his remarks. White House officials did not dispute the account. That's not actually true. They repeatedly disputed the account, saying that he didn't use those words, but certainly used harsh language. And for the fact of the matter that it was a private conversation, I see no necessity for him to hold back about why he thinks these things, or rather what he thinks, because it's pretty obvious why he thinks them. Haiti is a shithole, and it's a shithole for pretty fucking obvious reasons. Hillary Clinton and her brother, Tony Rodham, tore that country apart. The Clinton Foundation, previously Clinton Global Initiative, used that place as a breeding ground for all of their fucking laundering. And if you, if you follow along with Pizzagate shit, which a lot of regarding Haiti has been confirmed, there were a lot of fucking kids taken and sold into sexual slavery. If you were around for the beginning of the month, or the last show of the year, I actually talked about the fact that January is, oh fuck, what did he call it? Human Trafficking Awareness Month. And it's rather important that this is Human Trafficking Awareness Month because January, more than any other month, has the highest rate of abduction and sale of any, out of the entire year. I guess on those long, cold nights, those fucking politicians need a 7-year-old boy to cuddle up with and keep them warm. Certain Washington politicians chose to fight for foreign countries, but President Trump will always fight for the American people, spokesman Raj Shah said in the statement issued after the Washington Post first published Trump's remarks. Like other nations that have merit-based immigration, President Trump is fighting for permanent solutions that make our country stronger by welcoming those who can contribute to our society, grow our economy, and assimilate into our great nation, which is really the key part there, isn't it? We're bringing in a lot of people who don't integrate. Places like Miami have Cuban and Haitian areas where the moment you walk in, you won't, if you're white, you won't see another fucking white person until you get to the other fucking side of it. And you are certainly going to be harassed for not being part of their culture, but being in their area. Trump built his candidacy and presidency around hard stances on immigration, vowing to build a wall. Skip. The president's remarks were quickly met with scorn from Democrats and some Republicans. This is just poisoning the well, but throwing another wrench into bipartisan discussions on immigration, which had shown promise in recent days, according to legislatures. They were looking for a reason, anything they could, to throw in Trump's face regarding his amnesty position. Because Trump is not for amnesty for the Dreamers. And while I consider some of them valuable members of society, a lot more of them being between 18 and 24, if not younger. We won't deport people under the age of 18. But being between 18 and 24, refusing to go to college and instead relying on state benefits and welfare are a large portion of the taxes you pay and I pay if you're in the United States. Representative Luis Gutierrez said the comments will shake the confidence that people have in the ongoing immigration policy talks. I can't deny that. Democrats and Republicans in the Senate made a proposal. The answer is this racist outburst of the president. How is it fucking racist? They're shithole countries. Doesn't matter what color your skin is, your nation can be a fucking shithole. I'm just going to take a moment to talk about that fact because this is something that's actually been bothering me. They keep bringing up that it was a racist comment. Somehow this is a racist comment because it was targeted at Latin American and African countries and Caribbean countries. But the fact of the matter is, race had nothing to fucking do with it. It's entirely about the fact that these countries have not modernized. These countries, I mean, what is a shithole? A shithole is a hole that you shit in because you don't have running water. How much running water does El Salvador have outside of San Salvador and the other major city? One. There's 2 major cities in El Salvador. There's 2 fucking metropolis-sized cities, and everywhere else is a fucking shithole. And how about Haiti? They have been through one disaster after another, whether it be a political disaster or a natural disaster, which has left them in a position where they can't do much. Everyone in Haiti wants to get the fuck out of Haiti and instead move to the US or, God forbid, the Dominican Republic. With a 12% Haitian population in the Dominican Republic, that's the highest it's been in, like, forever, as long as I've known. The 2 nations hate each other. They hate each other more than fucking England and France hate each other. Because they share one little border and both believe that Hispaniola is their island. But no, we're gonna, they're gonna call it racist. Why? Why is it racist? No one can actually answer that question. But throwing the word racist around is how they fucking do it, because it feeds into that leftist, protectionist, emotional mentality that we have to save these people from their countries, but God forbid we actually call the countries what they are. They're destructive, they're corrupt, and they're shitholes. But I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself. I wanted to show you a video, or at least a portion of a video, from Fox News. Because Tucker Carlson is on fucking point in this one. This video might go on for a little bit, so forgive me if it stretches on a little long. But it's worth watching.
Well, good evening and welcome to Tucker Carlson Tonight. Today, as you doubtless heard during immigration talks, President Trump said something that almost every single person in America actually agrees with. An awful lot of immigrants come to this country from other places that aren't very nice. Those places are dangerous, they're dirty, they're corrupt, and they're poor. And that's the main reason those immigrants are trying to come here, and you would too if you live there. President Trump asked why America doesn't receive more immigrants from places you might want to visit on vacation. Why aren't we getting more people from Norway, he said, which by almost any measure, including the UN's measures, is the most developed and richest country in the world. While saying this, Trump used an expletive, and that's not surprising either, since he uses them all the time and was speaking privately. And yet, for some reason, virtually everyone in Washington, New York, and L.A. considered this a major, major event. Why is that? To find out, we're joined by Jose Parra. He was Latino Communications Director for Barack Obama's 2012 campaign, and he joins us in the studio. Jose, thanks for coming on.
Thank you for the opportunity.
So I think it's, I mean, of course you can have a debate over what countries we ought to admit immigrants from, and I think we're kind of having that debate. But what bothers me about the explosion this afternoon is the dishonesty in it. And I'll just give you one example. Joan Walsh over on CNN, an analyst over there, was asked just a minute ago, would you rather live in Haiti or Norway? And she said with a straight face, I can't say. Now, that's lying. If we've gotten to the point where we all have to pretend that every country is exactly as nice as every other country, then we're being dishonest.
No, it's basically they're talking about, I think the outrage here is about the insult and the expletive that is attached to the people who come from these countries and who are making a life here in the United States, contributing fully to the U.S. right now. They were talking specifically about El Salvador and Haiti, two countries where TPS was recently revoked by the Trump administration.
Right.
And between these countries, we're talking about the people from those.
Sorry, just one thing. TPS is the Immigration Protection Service. TPS essentially grants immunity to deportation due to extenuating circumstances within the nation they would be deported back to. Just wanted to make that clear because they don't explain it very well in this video.
Those countries, they're contributing close to $170 billion in GDP.
No, look, but I'm not. I mean,
and they're making a full contribution.
Well,
to the
I mean,
economy
it's actually it's a complicated picture. But I agree with you. If you're saying that a lot of people who come from those countries are good people, of course, I completely agree. But the idea that you're not allowed to say that they're pretty crummy countries, Haiti, for example, or El Salvador, I've been in both of them. That's why people are leaving them to come here. So I don't understand what the sin is. You're not allowed to point out that other countries aren't as good places to live as America? Like, what is the problem?
There is definitely an issue here because basically what's happening here is that the president is connecting and articulating the same vision that we saw in Charlottesville. When they're talking about we won't replace you.
What the fuck? Jesus, this is what pisses me off about the mainstream media and all of the people involved in it and the fucking leftist politicians who have worked so hard to create this running narrative of racism. The fuck does this have to do with Charlottesville? And yet there he name drops it for no fucking reason other than to show off and fucking, forgive me for saying, but virtue signal that he's on the right side of the Charlottesville issue. What the fuck? Anyway, back to the video. I apologize.
What the chanters and the marchers were talking about this time, it's the same thing, and it's not the same thing. Look, and it's the same.
Slow down.
What happened to the whole masses that on the Statue of Liberty that we're talking about?
Try and track with me here, okay? The president, from what we know, and maybe he said other things we don't know about, but what we know, he said these countries are crummy places, okay? They're holes or whatever. He used profanity, but the people who left those countries, some of them rode trains all the way through Mexico or hid in a wheel well of a plane to leave. They would agree with that. So why the outrage? Is it you have to lie and pretend, as Joan Walsh does, that, I don't know, I'd live in Norway or Haiti? Like, we've gotten to a place where nobody can be honest about anything. Do you see the point?
Well, first of all, one of the things is that do we apply the same metric to Eastern Europe? We're talking about countries that are not doing too well right now in crime measures and economic measures.
Make sure to call the Ukraine and Bulgaria shitholes, because, I mean, let's face it, most countries are shitholes. This is an issue that I have with everything he says. He's trying to spin it. He's trying to push his narrative about, oh, we're being racist because we don't hold Eastern Europe. Yeah, Eastern Europe is off the list too. Everyone's ignoring the fact that He doesn't want people from the Ukraine. He doesn't want people from Bulgaria. He wants people from Western European countries. He wants people from Japan. Excuse me. He wants people from Japan and China and South Korea and Taiwan, even Singapore. These are the people he wants. He wants people who will benefit the nation rather than, and it has nothing to do with the color of their skin or their fucking race. And if you think I'm being rude calling each of these countries shitholes, I recognize that my country's pretty shitholey too. I lived in Mississippi and Alabama. I've shit in a hole. I've also been homeless and seen this country from its lowest point. And as far as I can tell, shithole is just how you have to describe some things. When you shit behind a dumpster, or you dig a hole in the forest to shit in, I'm sorry, that's a shithole.
And other issues.
You're not going to hear me say, I'm not moving to Romania.
But we seem to be applying this this only to countries where there are brown people, such as Haiti and El Salvador.
Let's be totally
And we're talking about Norway, like you said yesterday, which again ties back to this social reengineering that they're trying to
I don't want to get all
implement.
fact-based on you, but Norway is, according to the United Nations... Well, here are some. The United Nations says that Norway is the most developed country in the world. Its sovereign wealth fund, I think, is the biggest in the world because of the oil discoveries offshore there, as you know. It's the richest place in the world, okay? Haiti is the poorest place in the hemisphere and has been for a long time. People are actually staying in this country right now legally because Haiti is so bad, we don't think they should have to return. So if you say Norway is a better place to live, and Haiti's kind of a hole. Anyone who's been to those countries or has lived in them would agree. But we're jumping up and down. Oh, you can't say that. Why can't you say that?
Well, let me tell you something. Most people in Norway, according to most polls, do not want to live under Trump's America right now.
That's fine. You're kind of missing the point, which is
because
the overwhelming...
It's a question about values. Okay. You know, you are attaching this label to people who come from predominantly brown countries, and that is a problem.
I don't know
and
why
that is how decisions on TPS are being made.
Okay. No,
you know, when you take away legal status, because these people were here illegally.
Okay, hold on. Can I just ask you again? Let me try to ask you a reasonable question.
From people who are contributing, to this country, then, you know, are you using the statute or are you using prejudice to make those decisions?
Right. Prejudice, racism, white supremacy, fine. But let's get back to it. So
Norway, Haiti, I mean...
One is the richest country in the world. The other is one of the poorest countries in the world. You think it's immoral to point that out. It's a statement of values. I'm asking you a very simple question. If Haiti isn't such a bad place, why don't we say to the people who are here temporarily in refuge from Haiti, go back, it's great. We don't say that because it's not great. Actually, it's everything the president said it was. It's not an attack on Haitians. It's an acknowledgement that their country is not as nice as other countries. And if you can't even say that out loud without being called a racist by people like you and the morons over on MSNBC,
oh, you're
then
just
you
calling me a moron.
I'm not calling you a moron. I'm saying anybody who says that's a racist statement should explain how it is. And you can't. You said it's like Charlottesville. How is it like Charlottesville?
Look, we're talking about a predominantly white country, and we're talking about a predominantly African country, or people of African descent. And the...
Anyway, I'm just going to cut it off there, because as you can see, this man spirals into fucking insanity rather fucking crazily. I mean, it's actually kind of shocking just how badly he tries to associate this with racism, even though it has nothing to do with race and everything to do with the state of those countries and their governments. One issue that Tuck never actually gets to get into in this video, and you can watch the whole thing, the link is down below. He never actually gets to get into the fact that these countries have severe corruption problems. Especially countries, you know, like Uganda, which came up quite a lot in the fucking discussions. Countries like El Salvador, and yes, even Haiti, have severe corruption problems, not only inside, but in their dealings outside. Haiti specifically has a long history of being corruptly manipulated by the Clinton Foundation and Clinton Global Initiative. And the fact of the matter is, you're not going to overnight solve that problem by calling what the president had to say racists. The longer we play this game about racism instead of addressing the real fucking facts about things, the more we're going to be spinning into McCarthyist absurdity. And that's absolutely what this is. This is leftist McCarthyism. Just like Me Too. Just like every other fucking thing they've been doing since 2014 and before then. This is absolute witch hunting. Using the most extreme language possible in order to bring out people who disagree and then say, ah, see, you're a racist too. Well, no, I'm sorry. I'm not a racist. I hate everyone equally. Unfortunately, that's not something that has been easy for people to deal with, because as you can see from this Grabby News article, there is video after video after video after video after video after video after video of people losing their fucking shit because President Trump called Haiti, not Haitians, Haiti a shithole. It's absolutely depressing that for all the shit that I have to talk about, I first have to spend 40 minutes or 30 minutes in my show addressing the fact that what was said has nothing to do with race. It's fucking bullshit if you ask me, and it's just part of this long-standing attempt by media companies to control the narrative, to control the very culture of America, and if you ask me, tear it the fuck apart. But we have a few other rather important stories to get to, so I'm just going to hop into those, leave that story there, because I know that story is going to develop further. They're not just going to forget that he called them shithole countries, and that's the worst part about this story. Best part about this story? President's probably going to get what he wants because the American people are going to be responding and saying, wait, how is that racist? But the next story on my list is pretty important. It's in my long-running series that I like to call Fuck China. Hold on, let me get this video to stop playing. Alright, China weighs slowing or halting purchases of U.S. treasuries. This is actually a very fascinating story. Now, I don't know how much you know about China and their treasury holdings in the United States. However, China holds about $1.2 trillion worth of U.S. Treasury bonds, which are debts, essentially. They help keep our economy up. Now, that may sound like a lot, but it's also important to recognize that the Federal Reserve holds $3 trillion in reserve bonds, or excuse me, Treasury securities. And that $3 trillion is able to keep us floating even if China shits itself, because the Federal Reserve has a history of forgiving debt to the United States, something it can do with the United States that China and other countries can't, because they invested that money directly rather than having that treasury bond written by them as a means of inflating and extending the economy. In fact, down below, if you want, you can find the latest, well, not the latest, but close to the latest, major foreign holders of treasury securities file from the TIC Data Treasury website. Mainland China holds 1.189 trillion, and Japan holds 1.093 trillion. And this is, the two of them compete quite a lot at being the largest holder and helper for the United States. Japan's interest is a far more honest interest, though, whereas China just wants to own them. And of course, this totals, and that's only, you know, 2 trillion out of the 6 trillion held internationally. We've got Ireland, Brazil, the Cayman Islands, the UK, Taiwan, Saudi Arabia, Russia, Canada, France, Germany, Turkey, Norway, the UAE, Sweden, Netherlands, Kuwait, Mexico. Shithole countries are on this list. Shithole countries own U.S. Treasury securities. So please keep that in mind as we're reading this. And note, there's actually two stories here. There's Bloomberg's story, and then there's the reality. But let's get through Bloomberg first. China added to bond investors' jitters on Wednesday as traders braced for what they feared could be the end of a 3-decade bull market. Senior government officials in Beijing, reviewing the nation's foreign exchange holdings, have recommended slowing or halting purchases of U.S. treasuries, according to people familiar with the matter. There's those fucking words again. When are we going to actually get sources, Bloomberg, Washington Post, New York Times? Whatever happened to journalistic integrity? The news comes as global debt markets were already selling off amid signs that central banks are starting to step back after years of bond-buying stimulus. Yields on 10-year treasuries rose for a 5th day, touching the highest since March. China holds the world's largest foreign exchange reserves at $3.1 trillion. That's kind of misleading because that's $3.1 trillion in total of all of the nations they hold, including most of Africa. Most of this $3.1 trillion, another whole trillion of it, is their ownership of Africa. Yet they don't address the fact that they fuck over Africa on a regular basis like this by calling in those debts, and regularly assesses its strategy for investing in them. It isn't clear whether the officials' recommendations have been adopted. Of course it's not clear because it's fucking bullshit, isn't it, Bloomberg? You're just trying to fucking spook the markets. The market for U.S. government bonds is becoming less attractive relative to other assets, and trade tensions with the U.S. may provide a reason to slow or stop buying American debt. The thinking of these officials goes, these officials, can I get a fucking source for the fucking life of me? According to the people, who asked not to be named as they aren't allowed to discuss the matter publicly. Again, this is utter fucking crap, but it's an important thing to think about, because let's recognize that while we're only now getting into a place where large media corporations and government-influenced agencies, companies rather, work to manipulate and produce far-reaching, confusing propaganda for the purposes of breaking down a nation's ability to reason about a situation, or even possibly find the truth, China's been doing it for more than 2 decades. The China Plan is literally a process of pushing out propaganda and seeing what effects they can have in other nations, pushing out money and seeing what influence they can buy in other nations. So the moment I see this, all the red flags in my head about China go up, because this sounds like someone is fucking with the U.S. as a high-ranking Chinese source. Or not even high-ranking, but connected to a high-ranking source. They ran straight to Bloomberg Markets, which sounds exactly like something China would do, doesn't it? No, that's not what China does at all. If China wants to make an announcement about economics, they do it from the Communist Party seat. They don't do it by leaking and going over to talk to American fucking news outlets. Anyway, with markets already dealing with supply indigestion, this is actually, that whole fucking paragraph is just fucking mumbo-jumbo. It doesn't actually mean anything. The Chinese officials didn't specify why trade tensions would spur a cutback in Treasury's purchases, though foreign holdings of U.S. securities have sometimes been a geopolitical football in the past. The strategies discussed in the review don't concern daily purchases and sales, said the people. Officials recommend that the nation closely watch factors such as the outlook for supply of U.S. government debt, along with political developments including trade disputes between the world's 2 biggest economies, when deciding whether to cut some Treasury holdings, the people said. This paragraph, on the other hand, is fucking confusing. One, it says this... One, they talk about a cutback in Treasury's purchases, which is far different from selling off Treasury's holdings. And then they go right back to saying, deciding whether to cut some Treasury's holdings. If China were to sell off their Treasury's holdings, one, we'd be fine. they would never sell off all of their Treasuries holdings, because holding that debt is holding a playing card, and China needs to hold its playing cards against the United States. But not only is that the case, they wouldn't sell off more than a menial amount like they did in 2016 anyways. I mean, look, they sold shit, absolutely. And then we rallied towards the end of 2016 when people started realizing, oh, Trump's gonna win. Just like our economy, Trump has done very well for U.S. Treasuries holdings in foreign nations. U.S. Treasury market is a deep, robust market within the world, and so we are confident that our economy, with the economy strengthening, will remain a deep and robust market, said the Undersecretary for International Affairs, which he told a group of reporters in Brussels. Any reduction in Chinese purchases would come just as the U.S. prepares to boost its supply of debt. The Treasury Department said in its most recent quarterly refunding announcement in November that borrowing needs will increase as the Federal Reserve reduces its balance sheet and as fiscal deficits look set to widen. Of course, the rest of this article just gets more jargony and bullshitty. I want you to go back and make sure to read the foreign holdings major foreign holders of treasury secretaries, because this is fucking important information. And this is put out by the fucking Treasury Department to let people know what American holdings are out there and a general idea of the kind of impact they can have. A quarter of our foreign held debt disappearing wouldn't be nothing. That would eat up our bond market for like a week. However, 1.2 trillion would turn around pretty quickly because Japan's economy is booming. And if they saw it opening up that they could take out China as the largest holder, Japan would jump at the fucking opportunity. However, the Asia Times had to come out and make sure everyone knew that this was fake news from Bloomberg. A Bloomberg news story on January 10th claimed that unnamed Chinese officials want to buy fewer U.S. Treasury securities. The U.S. dollar fell modestly, and U.S. bond yields modestly rose on the news. It's a fake news story for several reasons. First, the story is less than unattributed. It doesn't even cite sources at a particular state institution, but only people familiar with the matter. The story reads, senior government officials in Beijing reviewing the nation's foreign exchange holdings have recommended slowing or halting purchases of U.S. Treasury securities, according to people familiar with the matter. And second, China doesn't signal major policy changes through the American news organizations that it had previously kicked out of the mainland. Yeah, Bloomberg is not allowed in China. They're not allowed to broadcast, they're not allowed to interview. They aren't allowed to use their press credentials to enter China. So what the fuck is Bloomberg doing other than trying to manipulate the market from their position of strength as a media outlet? Third, and most important, Chinese holdings of U.S. Treasury securities haven't changed much in the past 5 years, other than that slight dip to 1.1 back in yeah, here. They sold off about $65 billion worth of treasury securities back in November of 2016, but have since then continually purchased a good $10 billion worth every goddamn month. The biggest change in Treasury holdings came from U.S. Federal Reserve, which increased its net holdings by nearly $1 trillion under its quantitative easing program, not to mention a couple of $1 trillion of mortgage-backed securities. It must have been a slow news day. U.S. Treasury yields have been rising, to be sure, but virtually all of the increase is due to higher oil prices. So this is where we are. You can't trust Bloomberg for international news This is a country that is fucking banned from entering China. This is a news outlet that is considered propaganda and market manipulative by China. And yet they were able to actually swing our market, dropping the dollar a modest amount and raising the value of bonds. I think the important question here shouldn't be, is China going to halt or sell off their securities, but rather, who the fuck did sell off their securities? Because that, my friends, is insider trading. And if you don't realize it, I'm sorry, we're being manipulated. Our market, for as strong as it's doing, our economy, for as strong as it's doing, is being manipulated. That's a serious problem. And it's not a story that I'm going to let go. Over the next few weeks, I'm going to probably going into much more detail about the world economy and its very, very tight interlinking system of holding debt for other nations. While internationally, the U.S. has more than $4 trillion of foreign-held debt, that is nothing compared to the $6 trillion of Federal Reserve-held debt and the other $4 trillion of mortgage-held debt. Yes, the American people hold some of the debt of the United States, and that is actually a very good thing. Now, of course, when that debt reaches something like 8 to 9%, we get another housing bubble, we get another mortgage crisis. But that's not where we're going. Mortgages have been regulated in such a way that protects at least that market from the dangers of subprime mortgaging and other subprime instruments. We're going to stay pretty secure at 4.7%, if not go lower to maybe 4.5 to 4.3% debt rates from mortgage securities. As the year goes on, our economy is fucking booming. People are buying houses. Things are doing really fucking well. Now, of course, there are other debts and securities that are posing a strong risk to the United States, but it's not going to be China that fucks us over. It's probably going to be ourselves, as it usually is. But of course, that's just me shitting all over China because I really, really hate the bullshit that China is trying to pull in our country. They've been doing it since the early 90s, investing heavily in Disney and other countries, other companies to produce movies and propaganda for them, essentially, to put China in as a hero country in any movie that has to do with going to space or fighting a giant monster. Go back and watch, what was it called? The Martian. You ever wonder why they had an entire segment of the movie about the Chinese helping them out? The Chinese making the decision to allow them to use their space station to get the people back. Yeah, there was a big old fucking check cut from the Chinese Communist Party to some directors in Hollywood for that, because that is how the China plan works. They're manipulating our politicians with money. They're manipulating our media with propaganda. They're manipulating everything so that they can take advantage of us. And it fucking disgusts me. Speaking of things that disgust me, though, let us move on to our next story, which is the leaky faucet that is just exploding out of Twitter. And this is actually a hilarious story. We're going to be going from a couple different sources today. We're going to be reading Breitbart. I know I don't normally read Breitbart with you guys because they can be pretty fucking biased, but Breitbart actually got an exclusive leak around the same time as James O'Keefe. And since it was published just about the same time, I'm going to start with them and then move on to Project Veritas. Twitter leaks. Employees describe extreme social justice warrior climate at tech giant. In several exclusive interviews with Breitbart, former employees of the company reveal a company dependent on celebrities, hostile to free speech, and silently fuming at President Trump's continued dominance on the platform. It corroborates the recent Project Veritas expose of a platform that is hopelessly biased and committed to censoring non-progressive voices. Our first source, who like the others wished to remain anonymous, at least they fucking say that. I mean, I'm not happy that Breitbart isn't giving us sources, but at the same time, I do understand the necessity of protecting sources in this situation, especially in the case of having signed a non-disclosure agreement or a non-compete. Who wishes to remain anonymous, described how the company rapidly abandoned its commitment to free speech after former CEO Dick Costolo was replaced by Jack Dorsey, who the source described as the definition of a social justice warrior. The majority of Twitter's management, says the source, believes the leftist idea that hate speech is violence. They absolutely believe in the idea that abuse scares people off the platform and that certain types of speech silence other speech. According to the source, Twitter's trust and safety and legal departments, distinct from the Trust and Safety Council, which is made up of left-wing advocacy organizations, are more tolerant of free speech than you might think, but later adds that social justice warriors like Anita Sarkeesian still probably have access to Twitter's upper management. Okay, that's an unnecessary addition. I don't think that Breitbart should have kept that in there, but of course, Breitbart is a pretty fucking opinionated outlet. So I'll let that slide for now, even though I didn't let it slide for any of the other news sources. Twitter employees are divided into 3 distinct groups, says the source. Hardline leftists like Dorsey and others, ACLU-type liberals who still believe in free speech, and lastly, there are workers who join the company on H-1B visas, visas which are awarded to essentially, if you're coming into the country and you provide a strong skill, you're brought into the country on an H-1 Bravo visa, who the source says are apolitical. The switch from Costello to Dorsey was highly significant, says the source. Costello focused on user growth, without taking a position on what non-illegal content was disallowed on the platform, whereas Dorsey has placed a higher emphasis on branded content, like a media company, where the style and tone of the content should match the image the company wants to project, which the source describes as welcoming, fun, and safe. In other words, Dorsey wants Twitter to be a feel-good, safe space, and not the site of political acrimony and put-downs that it is currently known for. According to a second source, the company openly celebrates when right-wing figures are banned from the platform. There was a great deal of celebration at Twitter when Milo was banned, says the source. When the source worked for Twitter, he says employees snarkily established the backlash over banning someone controversial in units of Milo, which referred to an individual's number of followers, their media reach, and their ability to respond to a ban with negative headlines and backlash from members of the public. It's like, he's 2 Milos, so we can't ban him, or he's half a Milo, so we can. Makes me wonder, does that make me like 1/100th of a Milo? Maybe 1.5% of a Milo? I'll take any percent of a Milo, honestly. According to the source, Twitter is almost entirely dependent on the goodwill of celebrities and public figures who are seen as the #1 factor drawing users onto their platform. Getting retweeted by a celebrity is seen by Twitter as the modern autograph. Thus, confirms the source, the real reason for the suspension of figures like Milo, Roger Stone, and satirist Godfrey Elfwick is because they offend a celebrity or high-profile mainstream figure. Of course, there are double standards, says the source, who agrees that in fights between 2 public figures, Twitter will pick the bigger, more powerful celebrity. The source also recalled hearing a rumor inside Twitter that Leslie Jones's agent had contacted the company to threaten a celebrity boycott if Milo was not dealt with. The source's account of Twitter's relentless focus on satisfying the whims of celebrities fits in with the stories of other employees, who have revealed how the company goes into crisis mode whenever a celebrity is upset. These sources have also recalled that then CEO Dick Costolo was receiving texts and calls from high-powered Hollywood agencies like CAA, threatening to pull their stars off the platform if they didn't play ball. Appeasing celebrities was not how Twitter explained their actions to the public, or even to their own employees. Internally, says the source, Milo was accused of dog whistling to his alt-right followers, to mob Leslie Jones, which we all know isn't the fucking case. He mostly just made a fucking joke at her expense. And due to the nature of Twitter, something that is Twitter's responsibility and not Milo's, other people joined in on the jokes because, let's face it, that movie was fucking shit anyways. Appeasing, and this constituted inciting violence against the actress. Notions like dog whistles are basically like Rorschach blots, says the source. People see what they want to see, and they can make even the most innocuous actions or words into something completely sinister through their own bias and projection. According to the source, a surefire path to a Twitter permaban is for a user to get on the wrong side of a celebrity who has more power to damage the company than they do, and who has the support of social justice warrior brigades both inside and outside the company. In other words, left-wing celebrities. Twitter's dependence on celebrities has been thrown into stark focus in recent days as Hollywood tears itself apart over the Weinstein sex scandal. After Rose McGowan, one of Weinstein's most vocal accusers, had her Twitter accounts briefly suspended last year, she and several other celebrities promised to boycott the platform. Jack Dorsey's response, notice how quickly he responded to the threat of a celebrity boycott, was to announce yet another clampdown on abuse and hate symbols. That was, October 13th and October 15th? Hold on a sec, I gotta look at this article just to make sure. No, it was literally one day later that he reinstated Rose McGowan's accounts. A third source has also come forward to shed light on Twitter's culture of snowflake identity politics. Yes, thanks for staying, objective there, Breitbart. I get it. I get that you want to put in your own bullshit, but it's actually kind of irritating, Breitbart. We need you. You produce good articles from time to time. Why do you let shit like this get through and produce so much better shit as well? Raise your standards, Breitbart. See, I'm giving you all the fucking leeway that I don't give the New York Times because you're an independent outlet funded by external sources. You don't deserve it. You really don't, Breitbart. I'm talking to you directly, even though I know you're not fucking listening. The fact of the matter is, you can do better than this. You have the sources. You have the facts. You have external sources. You have the Project Veritas video, for fuck's sake. You don't need to throw in the word snowflake. You don't. You don't need to dog whistle. In August, we reported that Google keeps tampons in their men's restrooms as a matter of policy because some men menstruate. More recently, James Damore's lawsuit against Google revealed that the company allowed someone who identifies as a yellow-scaled wingless dragonkin give a presentation on living as a plural being. Oh, trust me, we're going to be going into that story in just a little bit. We have to get through this one first. Once confined to the crazy houses of Tumblr and college campuses, fuck you, Breitbart, with your opinion. According to our third source, Twitter is no different. Like Google, they also put tampons in the men's room, although in Twitter's case, it was just during Gay Pride Week. During the same week, they temporarily replaced the men's room sign with a gender confusion sign. As a men's rights activist, that pisses me the fuck off. It's like, oh, yeah, we don't need a men's room. We'll just make sure that everyone uses the men's room except women, because we got to protect women, and we've got to show how much we care about every fucking minority fucking trip sitter. Oh my fucking god, it's bullshit is what it is. It really fucking upsets me. Especially because this is Twitter. They have it within their fucking ability to put in a fucking family bathroom, as they're called, and replace that sign, but no. Also similarly to Google, where sources familiar with the matter say senior executives reportedly were on the verge of tears after the election of Donald Trump, the source describes scenes of shock and despair at Twitter after election night. People were huddling up in groups and crying. SJW ally men were white knighting to comfort the women, and management sent out a memo saying that if anyone was too distraught to be productive at the office, they should take the day off. According to the source, there is also ceaseless agitation from employees to ban President Trump from the platform, but management has thus far ignored it. This corroborates the strong anti-Trump sentiment at the company acknowledged by Twitter employee Clay Haynes, who confessed to an undercover Project Veritas journalist that he and others at Twitter wanted to get rid of Trump. Now, I understand that Breitbart is known for half-truths and forcing their opinion into things, attempting to be the next Fox News or MSNBC of the right. But the thing about it is, all the shit they're describing is actually described by other people in the Project Veritas videos. And I can't remember how long this video is offhand, but we're probably going to watch about half of it together, because this is the Project Veritas undercover video, part of the American Pravda campaign that they're working on right now, in attempts to expose Twitter, Facebook, Google, YouTube, all of these major companies engaging in censorship of political opinions and other violations of the Marsh v. Alabama statute that I described weeks ago, which protects the American people, the American people's freedom of speech, even on a place owned privately, when the ownership of that private place is so extensive that the individual has no other option. By the way, if you haven't, look up Marsh v. Alabama if you didn't watch that video. I know my videos are long, I know my news shows are long, and it's hard to catch on all of it. But search up Marsh v. Alabama. I think you'll be fascinated with what you read. But let's get to our old friend, James O'Keefe, for a moment.
American Pravda by James O'Keefe. Adventure, betrayal, truth. Pre-order today at AmericanPravdaBook.com.
We're trying to get the shitty people not show up. It's a product thing.
Let's say it was a pro-Trump thing, and I am anti-Trump. I was like, oh, I banned this whole account. It'll go to you, and then it's at your discretion. And if you're anti-Trump, you're like, oh, you know what, Mo was right. Let it go.
The idea of the shadow ban is that you ban someone, but they don't know they've been banned because they keep posting, but no one sees their content. So they just think that no one's engaging with their content, when in reality no one's seeing it. I don't know if Twitter does this anymore.
How do you know if it's a bot and not a normal person?
Oh, you use machine learning. You look for Trump or America and you have like 5,000 like keywords to describe a redneck. And then you look and you like parse all the messages, all like the pictures, and then you look for like stuff that matches like that stuff.
So is it gonna like essentially ban certain mindsets and or people who could be negative?
No, it's not gonna ban the mindset, it's gonna ban like the way of talking.
You have access to DMs at Twitter? Oh, I do.
It's a lot of bad press if like, you know, people figure out that you're shadow banning them, it's like unethical in some way.
Trying to downrank it, we're trying to get the shitty people not show up.
Yeah, they said, oh, this is pro-Trump, you know, I don't want it because, you know, it offends me, this, that. And I say, I ban this whole thing.
I'm pretty sure every single employee on Twitter hates Trump. What we can do on our side is actually very terrifying.
Our last video exposed Twitter's eagerness to turn over President Trump's direct messages to the Justice Department. We think today's release will help you understand why. Because although Twitter presents itself as politically neutral, its culture behind closed doors is one of blatant censorship, systematic bias, and political targeting. While many suspected this was the case, today we present the proof out of their own Twitter mouths.
So we're probably about 90% anti-Trump, maybe 99% anti-Trump.
It's really hard to decide what to do about Donald Trump. Yeah, half of the people want to ban him, half of the people want to keep him.
Does everybody at Twitter feel?
Pretty much.
Pretty much.
Yeah, I mean, you got to go to Google in order to find the conservative.
What department do you I'm in safety policy. I'm in the controversial team. Oh my goodness! I'm the team everyone says a lot about, yeah.
Olinda Hassan is a policy manager for Twitter Trust and Safety. Her team is responsible for Twitter's rules and regulations, determining what content is and isn't allowed. Just last month, Trust and Safety updated their policy in an effort to crack down on racism and other forms of hate speech.
But how do you keep, like my timeline, like, how do you keep certain things off my timeline? So like, because people will, like, read
We're trying to downrank it, but you need to also have a control of your timeline.
So I've tried to, like, block people like Cernovich and stuff like that, and mute and stuff like that, but they still show up, like, all the time.
That's something we're working on.
I mean, I don't know what to do.
We're working on, where we're trying to get the shitty people not show up. It's a product thing we're working on.
We wondered which people Hassan was referring to. What forms of free speech does Twitter want to stop from showing up? Former content review agent Mo Norai shed some light.
Let's say it was a pro-Trump thing, and I am anti-Trump. I was like, oh, I banned this whole account. It'll go to you, and then it's at your discretion. And if you're anti-Trump, you're like, oh, you know what, Mo was right. Let it go.
Norai's job at Twitter was to review content flagged as harmful, offensive, or in violation of Twitter policy, and ban it if it was. Content review is an integral part of any social media platform, but as Norai describes, it is highly susceptible to abuse.
On stuff like that, it was more discretion on your viewpoint, I guess, how you felt about a particular matter.
Oh, so it wasn't automated. It was a user in services person would deem it pro-Trump and take it down.
For example, if it was, they said, oh, this is pro-Trump, I don't want it because, it offends me, that. I say, I ban this whole thing, and then it goes over and you're like, oh, you know what, I don't like it too. You know what, Mo's right, let's go. That's it. You're like, Mo's right, let's carry on. What's next? Keep it coming.
Yeah, bring me another one to take down. Yeah.
So I flag something that's going to go by you.
Correct, and then, you look at it, you're like, oh, hey, this is pro-Trump, and this might be like, oh, I don't like it.
Yeah, you know what? So on the reverse of that, they would just let a lot of the, I guess, left-leaning or liberal stuff to go through unchecked?
It can come through check, and then I'll be like, oh, you know what, this is okay, let it go.
Norai suggests Twitter's content review is more than a safeguard against hate speech. It's a tool used to promote a political agenda.
You made the comment that, Twitter maybe wouldn't, verbally say some things that they, wanted to put in their company policy, but they were kind of unwritten rules as far as the content that they would allow or disallow.
A lot of unwritten rules, and being that we're in San Francisco, we're in California, very little state, very blue state, you have to be, as a company you can't really say it because it'll make you look bad, but behind closed doors, a lot of stuff was like, hey, you have to do this way, or something like that. It was never written, it was more said.
But it may not just be average users feeling the heat. Does Twitter target certain political figures for suspension? And more importantly, why?
I should ask about this. Yeah, it's a really good point.
Pranay Singh is an engineer for Twitter's direct messaging team.
Why did they take his account down a couple weeks ago?
I didn't know we did that.
Yeah, his account went down, for a while.
Oh, it might be the U.S. government pressure.
What?
Yeah, they do that.
They do?
Yeah.
Why?
Because they don't like people messing with their politics. And he has shit on a lot of people.
Wow. He said the U.S. government would have done that. Would have asked Twitter to do it.
Oh, yeah.
Do you get requests from the government to take
What is Twitter's tactic when it comes to censorship? To find out, we spoke with former Twitter software engineer Abhinav Vodrevu.
One strategy is to shadow ban so that you have ultimate control. The idea of the shadow ban is that you ban someone but they don't know they've been banned because they keep posting but no one sees their content. So they just think that no one's engaging with their content when in reality no one's seeing it.
Shadow banning is a way of blocking users from a social media platform without notifying them. Tweets from a shadow banned user still appear to their followers, but don't show up in search results or anywhere else on Twitter. It's an effective way of deterring Nigerian scammers and other online fraudsters. But if abused, shadow banning is dangerous.
Anyway, yeah, if you want to watch the rest of that video, of course, the link is in the description box below. Feel free to peruse your way down there and watch it. There's a lot of good information in James O'Keefe's current American Pravda campaign. It's actually quite amazing the shit that he's got, the shit that he's gotten into. But he's not the only person angry. In addition to Breitbart and James O'Keefe, Brent Bozell writes a public letter to Twitter's Jack Dorsey, demanding a response in wake of hidden camera Twitter expose. The letter was posted to Twitter on Friday, citing a recent Project Veritas video stating, "Project Veritas's videos provide evidence which cannot be disputed." He continued, "The purpose of this letter is to ask if censorship of conservative voices is the official policy at Twitter. If not, what steps are you going to take to remedy this situation and release to assuage the public of Twitter's commitment to free speech? We are releasing this letter publicly and will distribute it to our millions of grassroots supporters. We will also release publicly your response, or lack thereof." It's unclear if Bozell's letter got any response from Dorsey. "We applaud and thank Bozell's recognition of the gravity of the story," said spokesperson for Project Veritas. "As an advocate of free speech, we are deeply troubled when what we have uncovered in these videos, and the worst is yet to come." And of course, here's the tweet at hand. I don't know if you guys can. You probably can't read that if you aren't running at 1080p. So, the letter he wrote says, "By now, you have no doubt seen the devastating and damning videos released by James O'Keefe's Project Veritas. In these videos, one Twitter employee after another is caught on tape smugly celebrating how conservatives are shadow banned on your platform. Project Veritas's videos provide evidence which cannot be disputed. The purpose of this letter is to ask if censorship of conservative voices is the official policy at Twitter." And of course, it goes on to say what I've already said. In addition to Brent Bozell, Milo Yiannopoulos and Roger Stone have gotten together, unfortunately you can't see the title, to denounce Twitter and announce a lawsuit against them. Award-winning journalist and New York Times bestselling author Milo is joining the longtime Donald Trump advisor and Republican strategist Roger Stone in an antitrust lawsuit against social media giant Twitter. Those are my favorite words in the fucking world right now. This is absolutely amazing. And what they're doing is absolutely within the realm of antitrust. So it makes me very proud to see that someone's taking such a serious action. Stone had his account permanently suspended in 2017 after posting several tweets with expletives, and of course in July 2016, Milo made headlines when Twitter permanently suspended his account following a negative review he wrote of the Ghostbusters movie. In a statement about Milo joining the lawsuit, Roger Stone said, "We continue to explore a broad lawsuit challenging Twitter's censorship and the hypocrisy of their rules for online conduct, which seem to be disproportionately levied against conservative voices in an obvious attempt to silence us. Verified tweeters call for my murder online every day, but Twitter doesn't ban them. We believe it is time to expose their manipulation of algorithms, shadow banning, and other online techniques used to limit our reach. It's time for Twitter to be regulated like a public utility or perish. I am heartened that my friend Milo is prepared to join our legal action, along with other conservatives who have been gagged by the Twitter censors." On January 11th, Milo put out a statement about the antitrust case, saying, "I am patient zero of the Twitter war against conservatives and libertarians. The company declared war on free speech when it banned me in July 2016. At the time, I appreciated the free pass, but I have come to realize that Twitter's recklessness and bias towards conservatives and free thinkers represents a threat to free speech and democracy, such as Twitter's monopolistic grip on journalistic disclosure." Footage released this week by investigative journalists at Project Veritas reveal a defiantly biased company whose hateful and divisive political attitudes are robbing libertarians and conservative journalists and media personalities the right to freely express their opinions in the press. The biggest tech debate of the next decade is whether technology companies, in particular social networks, should be regulated as public utilities. It is becoming increasingly clear, given the rampant abuses, that they should, and Twitter is the worst offender of them all. Milo will be discussing details of the case in a live episode of his new show, The Milo Show, on Dangerous.com, 2:30 p.m. Eastern Time on Thursday. So a week from the time of this announcement. And all of this is extremely fascinating information. However, it doesn't cover one of the biggest issues that Twitter still has, the fact that most people live under, like, near permanent shadow bans. Shadow bans never stopped. And while, you know, the guy said, I don't know if we still do that anymore, it's pretty fucking obvious that they do. There's a damn good reason that I don't spend much time at all on Twitter anymore. It's a fucking shit show. Not to mention, I'm not searchable on YouTube or Twitter. I'm not searchable. I don't come up. Most of what I had would say wouldn't come up. What I'm left with, on the other hand, is a place where I post links to the shit that I'm about to do, usually through the connections that GabAI and Minds.com have. I never post to the site directly and only ever load Twitter up for the purpose of reading my DMs and responding to my DMs. I don't actually have any interest in playing the Twitter game. And I find Gab a lot more welcoming, a lot more interesting, and I've been growing rather impressively on Gab at a rate of 10 to 20 new followers a day. That said, these social media discourse platforms are extremely important to the now and the future. They have given us a tool by which anyone can connect with anyone else and strike up a conversation. Anyone can respond to anyone else and have their, and be heard. However, more and more, Twitter, YouTube, Facebook have shown that they have no interest in allowing people to express opinions that they deem to be violent or racist or sexist. And at the end of the day, there's no reason to even use the platform if the platform doesn't do what it says on the tin. It's extremely frustrating because I mean, I didn't even get into Twitter until I started doing YouTube. And then as Twitter became more and more, I don't grow on Twitter. Twitter, I am, like so many other people, under the conditions of what must be, if not a permanent shadow ban, a blacklist that doesn't even get brought up in the Project Veritas or Breitbart articles, but undoubtedly is going to be addressed based on the way that they were talking about these things. Shadow banning is old news. What we're going to be seeing from Project Veritas in the future, very soon no doubt, is how the new shadow bans work. How accounts that are determined to be unwelcome on the platform, unsafe for their little safe space, are put in a permanent state of unaccessibility, having to instead rely on their existing connections in order to reach out, or move to another platform, as I had to do. I can't wait until this lawsuit actually starts, but in order to tide me over, fortunately, there is a lawsuit that recently got put out there. You guys remember James Damore, the guy who worked for Google and produced a remarkably tame article addressing the fact that they tend to be racist against whites and sexist against men? Well, guess what? The class action lawsuit has hit the fucking feeds. James Damore just filed a class action lawsuit against Google, saying it discriminates against white male conservatives. James Damore, a former Google engineer who was fired in August after posting a memo to an internal Google message board arguing that women may not be equally represented in tech. That is, fuck you, TechCrunch. God damn it, I skipped this paragraph. has filed a class action lawsuit against the company in Santa Clara Superior Court in Northern California. He claims Google unfairly discriminates against white men whose political views are unpopular with its executives. Damore is joined in the 161-page suit by another former Google engineer named David Gudeman, who spent 3 years with Google working on a query engine. According to Gudeman's LinkedIn profile, he left the company in December of 2016 and has been self-employed since. The lawsuit, filed by Dillon Law Group, says it aims to represent all employees of Google who have been discriminated against due to their perceived conservative political views by Google, due to their male gender by Google, and due to their Caucasian race by Google. More specifically, it accuses Google of singling out, mistreating, and systematically punishing and terminating employees who expressed views deviating from what the majority view at Google on political subjects raised in the workplace and relevant to Google's employment policies and its business, such as diversity hiring policies, bias sensitivity, or social justice. And Damore isn't holding back any punches here. According to his filing, Google employs illegal hiring quotas to fill its desired percentages of women and favored minority candidates, and openly shames managers of business units who fail to meet their quotas, in the process openly denigrating male and Caucasian employees as less favored than others. Somewhat redundantly, it adds that Damore, Gudeman, and other class members were ostracized, belittled, and punished for their heterodox political views, and for the added sin of their birth circumstances of being Caucasians and/or males. I'm not going to be reading the rest of this article because fuck you, TechCrunch, and your fucking bias, but this is a story I have been waiting on for a long time, and it brings to light some of the most fascinating stories about what goes on inside the single largest tech giant in Silicon Valley. Stories about sex parties, forums entirely for the purpose of discussing anything but heterosexual monogamous sex, and yes, they are internal forums at Google to discuss sex, because that is totally relevant to what they're doing there, right? There are stories of speeches being given by yellow wingless dragonkins who also have expansive ornate buildings in their head. Okay, look. I can't even begin to explain just how fucking weird some of these stories are. Men being openly mocked and shamed and booed every time, you know, the word men comes up, or every time someone says the word cisgender or straight. Just an outright culture of hatred inside Google. Not much different than fucking Twitter. And honestly, I can't stop laughing at the fact that this person identifies as an expansive, ornate building. I mean, why? Hold on, let me explain that to you in case you missed it. A lawsuit filed by former Google engineer James Damore claims that Google allowed an employee that identifies as a yellow-scaled, wingless dragonkin give a talk on living as a plural being. Now, for those of you who don't know what plural being means, what they're actually saying is, I have dissociative identity disorder and you have to accept that. A recent class action lawsuit filed against Google by former software engineer James Damore has given insight into the inner workings and PC culture of the Silicon Valley tech firm. It was discovered that Asian and Caucasian employees are not considered diverse, and the company and conservatives at Google are allegedly intimidated into silence. The latest revelation from the lawsuit is that Google allowed an employee that identifies as a yellow-scaled wingless dragonkin, as well as an expansive ornate building, to give a talk entitled Living as a Plural Being at a company event. According to the lawsuit, Google hosts a number of internal mailing lists for employees with alternative lifestyles, which include furries, polygamy, transgenderism, and plurality, for the purpose of discussing sexual topics. The lawsuit states that the only lifestyle that seems to not be openly discussed on Google's internal forums is traditional heterosexual monogamy. While presentations on living as a plural being, where identifying as an expansive, ornate building is considered acceptable, Human Resources reprimanded an individual who posted a mildly conservative opinion on parenting to the internal Google message boards. The message read, "If I had a child, I would teach him or her traditional gender roles and patriarchy from a very young age. That's the hardest thing to fix later, and our degenerate society constantly pushes the wrong message." Google HR responded with the following: "We do not find that post on its face violated any of Google's policies, but your choice of words could suggest that you were advocating for a system in which men work outside the home and women do not, or that you were advocating for rigid adherence to gender identity at birth. We trust that neither is what you intended to say. We are providing you with this feedback so you can better understand how some Googlers interpreted your statements, and so that you are better equipped to ensure that Google is a place in which all Googlers are able to reach their full potential. It seems that Google believes that you can identify as a yellow-scaled wingless dragonkin or an expansive ornate building, or both, but believing that gender is tied to the sex you were born as is unacceptable. This appears to be another example of how Google attempts to stifle and shut down perfectly reasonable conservative opinions at Google." Now, of course, James Damore is not the only person suing. In addition, we have David Goodman, I forgot his first name for a second there, who describes Google as having being dominated by a racist, man-hating hate group. David Goodman, one of the two ex-Google engineers suing the company for alleged discrimination against conservative white men, says the company is dominated by a hate group illegally promoting racism and misandry. I'm so thankful the word misandry comes up. That's really fucking important because it's absolute misandry. If you read the length, I mean, it's 161 pages. I have it linked down below. Unfortunately, it's on Scribed, so you have to sign up to download it. But go through and read the number of situations in which someone, just for being a man, was told to shut up and sit down by some, well, forgive me for using the phrase, but special snowflake. And then that person was booed down until they were shut up, and they had to instead listen to someone who knew far less than they did, had very differing opinions, and wanted to just shit on them. It's a very depressing fucking case study to read. Here, just taking directly from it right quick. Damore, Goodman, and other class members were ostracized, belittled, and punished for their heterodox political views, and for the added sin of their birth circumstances of being Caucasians and or males. This is the essence of discrimination. Google formed opinions about and then treated plaintiffs not based on their individual merits, but rather on their membership in groups with assumed characteristics. Google employees and managers strongly preferred to hear the same orthodox opinions regurgitated repeatedly, producing an ideological echo chamber and a protected, distorted bubble of groupthink. When plaintiffs challenged Google's illegal employee practices, they were openly threatened and subjected to harassment and retaliation from Google. Google created an environment of protecting employees who harassed individuals who spoke out against Google's view, or the Googly way, as it is sometimes known internally. Google employees knew they could harass plaintiffs with impunity given the tone set by managers, and they did so. Not only was the numerical presence of women celebrated at Google solely due to their gender, but the presence of Caucasians and males was mocked with boos during company-wide weekly meetings. This unacceptable behavior occurred at the hands of high-level managers at Google who were responsible for hundreds, if not thousands, of hiring and firing decisions during the class periods. And this is just from the summary. But back to the article. I don't hate Google, and I certainly don't hate the people who work there, writes Goodman. I wouldn't want this suit to give people a bad opinion of Googlers, but honestly, they brought this on themselves for tolerating the hatred, racism, and misandry. Sorry, my throat's fucking with me. Of a small, but vocal and organized group who wanted to use Google as a vehicle of social change, rather than a vehicle of delivering excellent service and products to their customers. According to the lawsuit, Goodman was fired after questioning a Muslim coworker's claims of being targeted by the FBI over his religion. Goodman asked why his coworker didn't file a civil rights suit if his claims were true, and then asked whether the FBI might have found something interesting about the coworker's recent trip to Pakistan. In Goodman's words, he was simply questioning the logic behind a coworker's story of victimization on the basis of his race and religion. But he alleges that Google said he accused his coworker of terrorism. Google writes in his blog post that he was attacked for standing up for kindness, tolerance, and just getting along despite differences, and that other employees failed to defend him because everyone is afraid of the hate group that dominates the discussion at Google. The lawsuit references hateful rhetoric against conservatives at Google, but Goodman's post offers a more extreme take on the situation. By not just saying that Google allows discrimination against conservative white men, but that a minority hate group actually controls the company culture. And it makes clear that Goodman believes others are chafing under this control, saying that many in Silicon Valley will secretly welcome the lawsuit. The lawsuit itself isn't trying to prove that there's a hate group, of course, only that Google broadly allowed harassment against white men and penalized Goodman and Damore for their political beliefs. Now, I kind of want to actually go back and read Goodman's blog post for you guys as well. I don't know why I didn't have that open. This was from January 9th. And honestly, I've read this guy's blog. He writes some really brilliant shit about programming. I mean, it's all older stuff, right? He didn't write anything through 2017, but after getting together with James Damore, he started writing again. I'm the other plaintiff on the famous Damore lawsuit against Google. Since there is some curiosity about the case, I thought I'd write this note to give people a little information about me and about my reasons for going forward with the lawsuit. First, I don't hate Google, and I certainly don't hate the people who work there. The large bulk of Googlers are wonderful people, smart, kind, and wanting to do the right thing. I wouldn't want this suit to give people a bad opinion of Googlers, but honestly, they brought this on themselves for tolerating the hatred, racism, and misandry of a small but vocal group and organized subgroup who want to use Google as a vehicle of social change. I was disappointed at the lack of support I received from the good people at Google when I came under attack. In fact, I was attacked largely for coming to the defense of others. I hoped my example would set a precedent, and others would join me in standing up for kindness, tolerance, and just getting along despite differences, but no. Although I am disappointed, I do understand why people stood silent while their colleague was treated unfairly. Everyone is afraid of the hate group that dominates the discussion at Google. No one wants to jeopardize their job or career prospects to defend someone they don't know. I understand, and this is why we need lawsuits like this, to make the consequences of going along with the illegal behavior of the hate groups worse than the consequences of challenging them. Courage from better incentives. I believe a lot of Googlers and others in Silicon Valley will secretly welcome this lawsuit as a vehicle for giving them the support they need to speak out when they see something wrong. At least, that is my hope. Wait, oh shit, is shit getting blocked in the chat? I'm sorry. I don't see anything getting spam blocked. I try to open up the fucking spam block. I always allow messages through. I apologize. Anyway, back to what we're talking about though. This is enormous. This is fucking huge. Because for the first time in a very long time, we're standing at the precipice of some very good things being accomplished and some very unjust and downright crazy things being done to make sure no one notices it. Today's show was put together out of so many more articles than I was even able to begin sharing with you guys. But I needed to make sure you guys had both sides of what's going on, because these major media outlets, they grow off the benefit of Twitter. They grow off the benefit of YouTube. They grow off the benefit of Facebook. And the last thing they want to do is run the risk of having Twitter hold them accountable or lump them in with the alt-right just for publishing information about these stories. But the fact of the matter is, the leaks on Twitter and the lawsuits against Twitter and YouTube and Google are an enormous step forward for recovering free speech on the internet, especially in light of the repeal of net neutrality. Now, I don't completely agree with Milo on everything he said in his statement. However, the idea of producing basic utility regulation to assure that freedom of speech is upheld and protected on platforms like Twitter and YouTube, rather than outright censored and forcing and the element of having people forced into association with fucking terrorists and ISIS members, having their videos demonetized and their accounts removed just for speaking an opinion that Twitter or YouTube or Facebook disagrees with. This is something that has to come to an end, and while this lawsuit is still a ways out, it's only just been filed back on... oh, where's the filing date? The 8th of January, and probably won't be heard for a few months in the very least. This is the beginning of something much larger. Unfortunately, if you read the New York Times, if you read USA Today, if you read Google News, you didn't see any of this shit. And logically so, if you read Twitter, they are fucking actively destroying any hashtags that don't involve Trump talking about a shithole or Chris Matthews talking about a Bill Cosby pill. And this is something many of us, I have no doubt, all of us are familiar with. We've all seen this time and time and time again over the last few years, more and more and more, where someone tries to get something trending and does pretty successfully, and when you read the records that come out of hashtags.org and Twanalytics and all of those other sites, you can see that this should have been at the top of the trending list, or at least on the trending list, but instead was blocked by Twitter. Or a person getting shadow banned, if not outright removed from the platform, without any rhyme or reason shared about it, not an ounce of transparency, because Twitter felt like it, because Twitter disagreed with them, or because YouTube disagreed with them and decided they needed to be put, as Black Pigeon Speaks was, in limited state mode for a video they considered harmful or dangerous. But it's not dangerous. Free speech is not dangerous. I don't actually believe in hate speech. Primarily because hate speech only serves as a vent of a person's true opinions. And it's very important to understand a person's true opinions, rather than forcing them to regurgitate the same bullshit everyone else does in order to look good. You won't be able to ever have a substantive relationship with anyone you don't allow to speak, you don't listen to, and accept that they have a different experience of life, a different set of opinions, a different way of looking at things that you do. I'm one of the most accepting people. A lot of people, I mean, I hear this from a lot of you guys. I'm extremely accepting and kind and warm-hearted. I give a fuck. But at the same time, I'm not going to stand idly by in order to protect people who feel slighted in order to, you know, exhibit control over a cultural narrative or move the culture in a way I believe that it should be moved. No, the culture is going to move the way that it does because we are a vast, vast collection of individuals who share a nationality, who share a state, who share a social network, who share... And this is why places like 4chan, 8chan have their own distinct personalities. Because when you take away the individual and stick to, you know, pure anonymity, you're going to get the darkest, not the best, of people. And that's really what they're trying to create, aren't they? They're trying to create varied forms of anonymity, where these people can hide behind the statement, I'm a victim. Or they can hide behind the statement, I was offended. They can hide behind the statement, this is violence. Without ever addressing the fact that they might actually have a hand in upsetting the person who upset them back. Or, God forbid, getting upset and getting histrionic about shit that has absolutely nothing to do with them, that they went out of their way to find and upset themselves with. I'm going to be following this lawsuit as closely as I can, as well as the lawsuit against Twitter and the, the condemnation of Twitter. I don't know why I said lawsuit of Twitter. That hasn't started yet, but I can assure you a lawsuit is very likely coming soon. When we see that record come out next week, I'm definitely going to be reading it for you and probably using clips from Milo's show. However, I have completely destroyed my throat tonight, and it is hurting like a bitch. I'm amazed that I was able to get through that in just 2 hours, and I'm so thankful to have had all of you guys here. This has been an absolutely wonderful show, and you guys make it wonderful. Thank you all so very much. If you want me to read something off or say something for you before the end of the show, do please say it now. While I am going through and saying my thank yous to everyone who decided to show up, such as Q-Rated Opinions, thank you very much, my favorite coon. Akiaski, thank you very much. Arakeen Green Moon. Lone Wolf 031, thank you. Danica Lee, thank you so much. Joey the Delight, thank you for showing up. Kevin Berktula, thank you for showing up. Michael Morris, glad to have you here. Coffee with Comment, hello and thank you. Lazy Leone Sin, I haven't seen you in forever. I'm so glad you were here tonight. Thank you. Jay Willis Series, thank you very much. I gotta read this off because I didn't catch this the first time through. But Jay Willis Series said the mainstream media does not know that Haitians are a nationality and not a race nor ethnicity. That is absolutely right, and I should have fucking added that in there. I really wish I had mentioned that during that story. Niklas Nidal, thank you so much for showing up. I think that's about everyone. Observer, oh, I'm so glad you showed up. And Dean Truelove, thank you as well. Am I missing anyone? Doesn't look like it. I'm so glad to have you guys here today. And now I'm just going to scroll all the way to the bottom and see if anyone has something they want to say. Jay Willis Series identifies as a sunlight. Arakeen Green Moon wants to identify as a handsome guy. Curated Opinions is a lawsuit kin. Oh, you guys are just the best, and you guys give me such joy to spend this time with. I hope you all have an absolutely wonderful night, and I will catch you on the flip side. Bonsoir. Mwah.